from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And happy to report I am marking myself safe and secure in the earthquake that occurred today in my neck of the woods. New Jersey and New York are hit with an earthquake today. And true story, I woke up, just to give you an insight into my world, right? I go to sleep pretty late. I'm on the air until 1 a.m. Eastern time. That's New York time. And I don't go to sleep. I work until 1 a.m. Eastern time. And after that, it takes me a while for the Café Bustelo, the Spanish coffee that's running through my veins while we do the show, to dissipate a little bit. So usually around 2:30, 3 o'clock, that's when I kind of start wrapping it up. Sometimes that goes into 5 a.m. But my point is, I go to sleep late, so I wake up kind of late in the morning. I'm not up at 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. I'm up at more like 9 or 10. 10:30 is a perfect number for me. And it was around 10:30, and my phone just kept buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. So I looked at it, and everybody's asking me, are you all right? Any damage from the earthquake, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? It's not April Fool's anymore. Stop playing. But lo and behold, there was an earthquake, and I slept right through it. Slept right through it. Now, some would think, no way you slept through it. Yes, not only did I sleep right through it, this is the second earthquake I have slept through. I was once on vacation in the Dominican Republic, staying at a hotel on I guess that's the northern part of the island, and in a town called Sosua. And went to sleep in the bed. Woke up, the bed was on the other side of the room, and there was a crack in the wall. And, the construction on the islands is usually pretty much not cement block, just cement, period, right? It was like concrete walls. And there was a 6, maybe 7-foot crack in the wall, and the bed that I was in ended up on the other side of the room. And I didn't feel a thing. I used to be such a heavy sleeper, not so much anymore, but I slept through the one that happened last night. As far as I know, everything is okay. But New York City Mayor Eric Adams, he came out giving some details on the earthquake. Check this out.
All of us felt in some way or another the earthquake that hit our city around 10:23 a.m. We felt the impact of this 12.7 magnitude earthquake. The epicenter was in Lebanon, New Jersey, about 50 miles from New York City. And as you know, this is a developing situation where you're always concerned about aftershocks after an earthquake. But New Yorkers should go about their normal day.
So that's New York City Mayor Eric Adams giving his report on what's going on, and urging people to make sure that their neighbors and friends are okay, and which I did. I started texting everybody I knew. I was like, hey, look, I'm okay. Are you okay? What's going on? A friend of mine, somebody, through my network of personal contacts, is in charge of the operations of a building in Manhattan, and told me that they had some minor damage, like some cracked windows as a result of this, which I thought was crazy. That's literally, lower Manhattan. And this thing happened in, whatever it was, Tewksbury or Shrewsbury, Lebanon, New Jersey. That's almost Philadelphia. So to think that this thing traveled all the way is fascinating. And my initial thought was yesterday, right? I was on the air and I was saying things like, the CIA is reporting that there will be an imminent strike from Iran in the next 48 hours. And I thought, oh, my gosh. And I was downplaying it, and I poo-pooed it. And I said, oh, come on. Those things never happen. They never attack. And I thought, maybe it's not an earthquake. Maybe it's an attack, right? Maybe we got hit with a torpedo. Who knows? All sorts of things go through my mind. I sleep with my tinfoil cap on. And then I just, I talk myself out of it when I wake up. So anyway, lo and behold, it seems that it really was an earthquake. And we're going to get into that in a couple of minutes with a geologist just to explain exactly what's going on and why places that have never had an earthquake are getting hit with earthquakes. There was also a fascinating picture of the Statue of Liberty getting hit by lightning that happened yesterday. And I'm wondering if all of these interesting weather and events have anything to do with the eclipse that's coming up on Monday. I don't know. But we'll find out a little bit more when we talk with our geologist. But it was very interesting to me, the fact that, everybody felt this thing and knew what was going on. My daughter called me to check on me to see if I was okay because I go to the gym usually in the early afternoon. Today I went in the late afternoon. And while I was there, I guess there was an aftershock that ran through, again, my neck of the woods. I didn't feel a thing. And asking me if I was okay because her mom was there and, was somewhat alarmed because she was in the home and felt the entire building shake. And others had told me the same thing. They said, the whole building shook. The whole block was shaking. It was just quite astounding. A friend of mine told me he was at work and everybody was saying, "Did you feel that? Did you feel that?" And he was like, "Man, I didn't feel anything. What happened?" So it makes me wonder, are we getting gaslit here? Is this thing really shaking or what? But lo and behold, I believe that we did have an earthquake, and I think just some people are more susceptible to those things. Kind of like going on an elevator, right? Some people go on an elevator and their stomach goes up to their Adam's apple and then right back down to their feet, and other people are just like, "No, I didn't feel anything." So I don't know what determines how much of that inertia that you feel or how much of an earthquake you feel, but it is it's anybody's guess. So we're going to talk about that. Then I want to switch gears once we discuss a little bit of earthquake action on this wonderful Friday night with you all, America. And, of course, your calls are always welcome. We're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about what's going on with criminals repeatedly entering the United States illegally and then harming U.S. citizens once they're here, right? These are not people that are, like Trump said, these are bad hombres, very bad hombres. And we have to, at some point, we have to realize there are people getting killed by criminal illegal aliens. What are we doing to stop that, right? Texas is now building their own border wall, which is great. Great for them. Of course, I'm sure they'll get sued by somebody for that. But I don't see Biden doing any of that. And then I want to have a conversation, an in-depth conversation about Marxism and what Marxism looks like in the next generation. Now, I know I was having this discussion with a friend of mine recently about how, there's a little bit of a McCarthy in me, right? I tend to see Marxists everywhere. I see them everywhere. Where others don't see them, I see them. And some people think I'm making them up. I don't think I'm making them up. I don't think I'm creating a boogeyman. I think that Marxism is a dangerous ideology that goes way beyond paved roads and single-payer healthcare systems. And it really is something that would lead to the demise and destruction of the culture that we know in America today. And we can talk more about that, but we're going to get into a little bit of that. And then a fascinating story from a journalist on his new book called Squeeze Plays that I really want to get into because I just think it's an interesting story about a web of corruption that stretches really into the upper echelons of power. And that's ultimately what it is, right? That's what politics is. By definition, it's the balance of the influence of power, but we must ask ourselves, what are people doing to balance that power? And how do they get this influence? Well, obviously, they'll do anything in some cases. So stick with me, folks. Make yourselves incredibly comfortable. It's Friday night. We've got an amazing show in store for you. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is one of the largest earthquakes on the East Coast occur in the last century. So I immediately directed my emergency management team, the second we received word of this, to start doing damage assessments, any life in danger, and finding out whether there's any bridges or tunnels that are compromised. And so that was the first reaction you'll be hearing from the team that has been working on that. I also immediately spoke to Governor Phil Murphy to offer any assistance and to find out what is happening in his state, which again was the epicenter. Our teams have been in constant communication with the mayor of New York. We also spoke to the MTA to ensure the integrity, the structural integrity of the subway system, the Port Authority.
That is Governor Kathy Hochul from New York giving an update following a 4.8 earthquake, a 4.8 magnitude on the Richter scale earthquake that struck the tri-state area. And again, this thing came from part of New Jersey that's closer to Pennsylvania than it is to Manhattan. And still you saw the effects of this in Manhattan, in New York City. Governor Hochul continued.
Been in communication with the White House. They reached out to us. The Deputy of Homeland Security Advisor, who's actually with President Biden right now surveying the damage in Baltimore, called us, and I believe they felt the effects even in Baltimore. So it's been a very unsettling day to say the least. But the White House offered any assistance. Senator Schumer reached out, offered any assistance. So right now it's most important that we have our structural teams out there, our engineering teams, surveying our bridges, our roads, any area there could be a fault line that is not easily detectable, to make sure that passengers on our rails as well as our commuters are safe.
And I think this is an enormous concern for those in the New York area and those across the country that have family in the New York area that are thinking, what's going on? Do we need another bridge collapse like the one that we saw, the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed after it was hit by a boat? It's funny how the media paints this as a bridge collapse. The bridge didn't collapse. It was knocked down. But either way, the point I'm making is that this is an incredibly important point, and it's important that there was some minimal damage that I've heard of, but Governor Hochul says that in their immediate assessment that there were no immediate reports of injuries or damages. Listen to this.
We've not identified any life-threatening situations, but we are certainly asking our local law enforcement and emergency services teams to be on guard for that as well. But again, we are going to be reviewing all potentially vulnerable infrastructure sites throughout the state of New York that is critically important in the aftermath of an event like this.
Now, there are seismologists and geologists that are all over television and radio and whatever giving their assessment of this. And I think it's important to get their opinion. And that's why I wanted to check in with a geologist that's been on this show before. He's the executive director of the CO2 Coalition. And he's also the best-selling author of a book that we just recently discussed. And I guess by happenstance, he's back because he knows about this stuff. Very Convenient Warming, How Modest Warming and More CO2 Are Benefiting Humanity. Geologist Gregory Wrightstone, welcome back, sir.
Yeah, good to be on with you. Fortunately, this was really a fairly small earthquake. I spent the day in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, not far from where the earthquake happened in New Jersey, and no one there, I was speaking at a conference, no one there recognized, knew anything until we heard news reports. So we didn't feel it there in Harrisburg, not far from the earthquake. But again, it's 4.8, and if you look in the Richter scale, what it tells you is an earthquake of that size is what we found was that you can feel it, but very little damage. It can knock maybe pictures off a wall, or maybe you can shakes enough to knock you. You've got something on a counter that might fall off. So there's rarely any structural damage. The good news is these things are just, for this area, geologically and tectonically, it's very, very quiet. And there's really not, it's rare. The biggest earthquake in New Jersey occurred more than 250 years ago, and it was a 5.3. So over 300 plus years, the biggest earthquake's 5.3. You can sleep pretty soundly that you're not going to have an earthquake that brings buildings down or anything like that. It's hard. The thing with earthquakes, they're notoriously, I was going to say difficult. They're impossible to predict when they're going to occur. We can use past history of where they're occurring to indicate that they might occur again there. But again, in the East like this, they're so rare. We should be thankful. But in terms of prediction, I made a prediction earlier today that I was pretty confident was going to be fulfilled, and certainly it was that the climate bedwetters were going to tie this earthquake to climate change. And lo and behold, we saw it all over on X, Twitter, people linking this. See, this is what climate change is going to happen. We're going to have more earthquakes, and there's nothing more silly or ridiculous than that. I mean, they tie everything to climate change. I mean, they just last year they tied increased toenail fungus to climate change. Come on. And so that did come true, my prediction. But again, I was spent the day also with another geologist from Nevada, and she was telling me she just laughed. She said 4.8. We get, that's nothing. We don't even think it's much of an earthquake like that. So the people from earthquake country in Nevada, California, they'll just laugh about people getting all agitated and excited over this relatively minor earthquake. And thankfully, it is only 4.8. But again, your listeners should be comfortable in the assessment that these are so rare. Even a mild earthquake like this only occurs once every 4 or 5 decades. So that's the good news I want to bring to your listeners. It's not likely to happen again. Now just watch. There'll be a big one tomorrow after it's not going to happen. Never
Gregory
fails.
Wrightstone, I want to ask you, because I know you said they're difficult to predict, but I know that California, they're always waiting for one, right? Because they're on major fault lines there. Is it that we're not on major fault lines here in New Jersey, New York area? Or is it that we're just predisposed not to have them because we're on the East Coast?
Well, you do have ancient fault lines that run through here. The key here is it do we have tectonic stress going on? In other words, is there actual modern motion? The earthquake occurred in what was called the North Newark Basin. It's called a Triassic Rift Basin. And this was back about 200 million years ago when the supercontinent Pangaea started breaking up. And if you look on a globe, you can just imagine looking at a globe. If you put North and South America and push it over to the west, it fits perfectly into Africa. And that's because during that time, it started spreading. This North Newark Basin where the earthquake occurred was one of these, what's called a failed rift basin. And it started spreading apart and then it stopped. And then the eventual spreading center, which is now the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, took up. And so we've got these faults associated with the Triassic Basin. But again, the key here is there's no motion that might be pushing them one way or another. So it's very, very quiescent structurally. And what we might have is there might be some component during the last ice advance. We had thousands of feet of ice across northern United States, all of Canada. And the weight of that ice actually pushed the mantle of the earth down, and it's slowly rebounding. So we have the east coast of the United States is tectonically subsiding, and some of the areas are subsiding at about the same rate as sea level is rising, so accentuates sea level rise. And so we have that tectonic action that it could be putting some stress on these ancient faults. But again, we have to look at history to say that these are so rare. And we can confidently say that we're not in a time where we're going to see a series of these things.
Gregory Wrightstone is a geologist and the executive director of the CO2 Coalition. Gregory Wrightstone, I want to thank you for being with us. The music means they're kicking both of us out of here, but I appreciate it. And I feel a lot better that we're not going to hopefully get hit with a lot more. There was an aftershock that was a 4.0, but I think we could handle it. Gregory Wrightstone, check out his book, A Very Convenient Warming, How Modest Warming and More CO2 Are Benefiting Humanity. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
Across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
He'd been in our jail 11 times. He had seven different names. He had 3 different birth dates. He'd been to prison 3 times. He's been deported 8 times. And what I said was, and he had over 20 charges in 20 years.
That is Sheriff Richard K. Jones, Butler County, Ohio, at a press conference saying that this illegal immigrant from Mexico, Fermin Garcia Gutierrez, has multiple deportations, and now he's been charged with murder in Ohio. And he continued. Listen to this.
We've had over 1,000 prisoners on state charges, not federal charges, state charges, in the Butler County Jail in Ohio. Not on the Texas border, not on the Arizona border, in Butler County, Ohio. We border by water and by bridge, I believe it is, Canada. Ohio does. That's the northern border, and it's vulnerable at this point.
So I want to get into this story because I think it's, again, we have a choice that we can make, right? We have a choice. We can say, oh, yeah, we've heard this before. These illegals, they come in and they kill people. Nobody's doing anything about it. And listen, I'm the first one that occasionally gets jaded and feels like that's how I cope. And I go, yeah, what are we going to do? That's it. You know, I throw up my arms and I kind of pout a little bit. And I'm like, God, this is horrible. I'm moving to Florida, right? And I have those moments. But the reality is we really can't accept this, right? We have to dig deep here and realize that we have to be vocal about this. We have to push back on this. And I want to get some reaction on this from the spokesperson for the National Police Association. She's been here a number of times. She's always terrific. Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith, welcome back.
Rich, I'm so glad to be with you to talk about this issue. And, you know, Sheriff Richard Jones of Butler County, you know, he's been an outspoken voice in this issue for many years. And he's right. Our system is broken, and every state's a border state now.
I agree with that. And I think most people see that too, right? I think that might have been a catchphrase that, you know, people were using back in the days. But the reality is now, everybody's children are at some sort of heightened risk of getting attacked by a Venezuelan gang member or an illegal alien from any part of the world that may, in fact, hurt them for whatever reason. And I say that confidently, and I'm not bragging. I think that's just the reality of life, and it's a sad thing. But that's where we are, Sarge.
Well, right. We've got, so in Seattle, we've got a quote-unquote migrant camp at a tennis court they are threatening the city. This is about to turn into the next, you know, Chop Chaz Summer of Love. We just had a child raped in Massachusetts at a migrant shelter. We had a police canine 2 nights ago murdered in prison by MS-13 gang members. We had in my native county of DuPage County, Illinois, I think it's yesterday, we had an illegal alien from Mexico who'd been here 2 weeks nearly decapitate his wife in front of their kids. And then, of course, we've got squatters in New York. We got tourist burglars in L.A. It's a problem.
It's a big problem, and I don't see the federal government doing anything to fix it. Of course, we've seen Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, who's getting the brunt of this. He's putting up razor wire and then getting taken to court over it. Now he's putting up actual physical barriers and barricades. I'm guessing that they will take him to court over that as well. Short of electing a new president who's tough on immigration like Trump or someone else, there's nobody else running, so Trump is the only option. I see that as the only way to move forward. But what do, you know, the folks you represent, right, as the spokesperson for the National Police Association, there are police departments and sheriffs out there, and I think some of them may have sipped the woke Kool-Aid, but for the most part, I think they're hamstrung because they're not federal law enforcement, and this is a federal issue, and there's a limitation on what they can do. What is your advice to all of them that are listening?
Well, what law enforcement has to do is to continue to do their jobs and do everything we can to arrest and then get charged people committing crime. You know, the problem is, like here in Arizona, where I now live, our governor just vetoed a bill that would have given Arizona law enforcement the ability to arrest people simply for being here illegally. That's kind of a rare thing now around the United States. Can you arrest somebody for being here illegally? But I would encourage my brothers and sisters in law enforcement, continue to do your job, keep yourselves and your citizens safe, cooperate with federal authorities like ICE and the U.S. Marshals, who are trying to stem the flow of what is occurring, and just keep the faith, because at some point this has got to change. We are seeing sanctuary city leadership starting to make some changes. You know, let's look at Eric Adams in New York City, right? There was no bigger cheerleader for being a sanctuary city than Eric Adams. And now he's starting to push back on his own governor. Now go to my native Illinois. Unfortunately, we have a mayor in the city of Chicago and a governor in the state of Illinois who still continue to pour as much money as they can into the illegal migrants and into that situation. And how are they getting paid back? They're getting paid back with disease, not just crime, but disease. We're seeing diseases that we haven't seen, Rich, in our lifetime are making a comeback here in the United States. So it's not just crime, but it's diseases, and it's people who have no intention of assimilating. And of course, we have no idea who they are, so many of them, and what they're doing here. We now have Chinese nationals that are pouring into this country. One was just caught near a Marine Corps base near the border in California, and the federal government hasn't told us yet what that illegal was doing there.
29 palms, right?
Frightening. Yes, it's you know, Christopher Wray keeps talking about, you know, terrorism and that Black Swan event. I think we're there.
Folks, we're on with Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith. She's a spokesperson for the National Police Association. And Sarge, this situation, I agree, is beyond out of control. And it's we're trying to like codify this so that it's legal. You know, Biden seems to be trying to pave the way to make everything okay, so that it's no, the border's open, they're invited, because he's literally the one doing the invitation, so that we can't call it an invasion. But I think it doesn't change the fact that we have a 4,000% increase in Chinese nationals at the southern border, and then when we start catching them, they're at U.S. military bases. This has to set off alarms, red flags for somebody in the White House. It almost seems like they're not concerned. And that's, to me, what concerns me the most is how flippant they are and how they think, it's all right, don't worry, no, we're going to be all right. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about a specific case of this illegal immigrant that's been charged with a horrific child sex crime, arrested by ICE after the cops let him go, because so much of that is going on. Folks, stick with us. We continue our conversation with Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith, spokesperson for the National Police Association. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We've had roughly 1,000 prisoners in our jail in 3 years since Biden's been president. Of that, we've had at least 2,000 charges, state charges, on these 1,000 prisoners. The cost is roughly, to house these prisoners, $2 million. The court system and everything that goes with that, another $2 million. Butler County has had to pay $4 million in Ohio, and we're not the only one. There's over 3,000 counties in the United States, county sheriffs.
Again, that is the sheriff in Butler County, and I want to highlight something he said. That he said that they've had this 1,000 prisoners with 2,000 charges. And he's right. He's not the only county. He's not the only sheriff that's going through that. You've got stories all over the place. One of them that I'm looking at on border security, here's the headline: illegal immigrant charged in horrific child sex crime, arrested by ICE after police let him go. ICE says that it's frustrating when detainers are not honored. Now, I don't think that local law enforcement is not honoring detainers because they don't want to. It's likely because it is their directive from their administration, the local administration, like you've seen in New York and other sanctuary cities. But ICE says it's arrested a Colombian illegal immigrant charged with the rape of a minor in Massachusetts. The suspect was arrested but later released by local authorities, despite ICE's request to hold him. The unnamed Colombian national was stopped entering the U.S. illegally in July of 2022 and then released into the U.S. with a notice to appear in court by Border Patrol. He was also enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program, known as ATD, which means catch and release, right? ICE said he was arrested in Lynn, Massachusetts in January for the alleged rape, indecent assault, and battery of a minor over 14 and arraigned in court on January 29th. Immediately, ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations Team, ERO, lodged an immigration detainer with the Lynn District Court. And they finally got this guy. It's a shame to see the way this whole thing happens, but this is how it happens. Now, our guest is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith. She is the spokesperson for the National Police Association. And Sarge, nobody wants to hear these stories about, minors being raped or anyone getting killed. But I understand that crime is something we can't prevent totally, but we should be able to do better than we're doing. No?
Well, we're at a point in our country now where really since 2020 and this attack on our law enforcement, this attack on our justice system, we have enough to deal with our own criminals here. Why are we importing literally millions of people who we know nothing about? Just like this Colombian we're talking about in the Boston area. This is Essex County Sheriff's Office, who, by the way, hasn't really made a statement about this. But what happened is, and you're right, those cops don't want to let these people go. But when you politicize this issue, crime should not be a political issue.
Right.
Keeping people, especially children, safe should not be a political issue. But this ridiculous lack of cooperation with ICE, which stems back to, really this goes back about 10 years, this vilification of ICE, this vilification of the Border Patrol. And it has become absurd now where we are bringing people into this country who we either don't know who they are or we don't really understand what they are capable of. And now people are suffering, including this child that we're talking about in the Boston area. And I want to, something Sheriff Jones talked about in Butler County too, where he talked about how much this is costing. If you look at this just as a purely financial issue, it is costing counties and cities around this country millions and ultimately billions of dollars to deal with this situation. I live in a border county. I live in Pima County, Arizona, and our sheriff's department has spent millions of dollars dealing with this migrant crisis. And it's incredibly frustrating because it's not the county's money, right, Rich? It's my money. It's my property taxes.
When you hear the government spending money, everybody their skin should crawl. The government doesn't make any money; they just take money. And you hear that, and the whole thing is shocking to me. I can't believe that I'm the only one that's outraged here, and obviously you are. And there's a handful of us, but I feel like nobody really. They're just, oh man, what a shame. People have become so used to bad news, Sarge.
You know, you're so right about that. We've just we shrug our shoulders and say, well, we don't really have any control over this, and we get on with our lives. We do have control over this. You can go to your city council or your county board meeting and you can express your extreme displeasure with this. And then, of course, you can get involved in the political process in this country. We're in this huge election year, and it's not just about who's going to be president. It's who's on your city council, who's your mayor, who's your sheriff, who runs your county board. And it's not about the people, it's about the policies. And we have got to look at these ridiculous open border, migrant-centric policies. And as American citizens and American voters, we've got to say, enough. I want to focus on America. I want to focus on our people and our safety and shut the border and take back operational control, not just of the southern border, but the northern border as well.
I say let's take back operational control of the United States. So from your lips to God's ears.
Exactly.
Now, Sarge, let everybody that's listening know about the work that you're doing at the National Police Association and how they can support that.
I'll tell you what, if everybody could go to nationalpolice.org, that's nationalpolice.org, take a look, sign up for our newsletter, take a look at all the pro-law enforcement articles that we offer, the homeschooling program we offer, and then if you can, hit that donate button and help us to support not just American law enforcement, but the people who support what they do.
Well, amen to that. Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith, I appreciate you and all the men and women in blue that are out there and the work that you guys are doing at the National Police Association. Thanks for being with us. You're a gentlewoman, a scholar and a patriot. Thank you.
Great to be with you as always. Enjoy the weekend.
I need that. Thanks, Sarge. I appreciate it. Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith. A gentlewoman for sure. Folks, stick with me. We're coming right back. Your calls and more. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
A lot of the Biden policies are oriented towards what maximizes the chance of re-election for Biden this fall.
Right.
That's a big part of the reason we're not seeing deportations in this country. These are potential long-run voters for the Democrats. It's why we're seeing soft border policies. And this isn't some sort of wild theory. Democrats themselves about 10 years ago were saying the same thing. Loose border policies, lax illegal immigration policies are a big way for Democrats to secure lasting electoral majorities. And so you want to know how somebody behaves, you want to know what policies they support as a party, look at their incentives. And their incentives to win elections are tied to so many of the things that they're doing today that are still destructive for America as we know it.
The incentives are incredible. Right. And I have a whole other report on that. We're not going to get into it now. I'll do it a little bit later. But some of the benefits for people that are coming over the border into the country are really quite astounding. And, you know, I first noticed this a couple of years back when my oldest daughter graduated high school. And she was filling out, you know, financial aid forms and whatnot. And there was a series of questions that said, are you a dreamer? And she was like, am I a dreamer? And I was like, it's not a literal question. It's a specific category. You know, if you were brought here by immigrant parents and when you were before 5 years old or whatever the criteria was. And she was like, oh, I'm not. But I was like, hit it just to see what it says. And when you hit it, it brings you to a different page that tells you that you get the like in-state tuition. Anyway, the bottom line was there was an automatic benefit to being a dreamer. And I said, well, I don't want you to lie on the application. I just wanted to see what it did. And she went back and put the right information in. And then she didn't get any money, right? And she was like, oh, that's interesting. And I said, yeah, welcome to America, right? It's fascinating how you could be born in this country and then you have zero benefits in many ways. And when you're not born in this country, you're afforded these opportunities. Now, I understand we're trying to help certain people that are disadvantaged. But ultimately, who matters most? Right? You've got to look out for your people. You've got to not incentivize illegal immigration. Nobody should say, oh my gosh, things are so much better in America than here. Let's just come in and let everybody in. We went from 1 million a year of legal immigrants to something like 7 or 8 or 10 million illegally. Can't happen. Stick with me. Valdez, I'm coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of our program, and if you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337-8334-Valdez. And plenty going on today. Obviously, we had an earthquake in my neck of the woods today, one that I did not feel, nor did I feel the 4.0 aftershock. I was at the gym for the aftershock, and I was sleeping during the original earthquake, and I didn't feel it. I didn't see much ado about anything, but people were definitely freaking out, and someone in my immediate orbit, like I said, is operationally in charge of a pretty big building in Lower Manhattan. And they said that they did have some cracks in their windows and whatnot. So there was some minimal damage, but that's the case with the 4.8 magnitude earthquake. Of course, the magnitude being from the Richter scale that occurred in New Jersey and hit New York today. By some accounts, they're saying it was reached or felt by 40 million people. And I guess that's true. I'm not part of that because I didn't feel it. I honestly didn't feel it. But that's part of what's going on in the world tonight. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says that he's going to continue busing illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities until he gets a new president. Good for you, Greg Abbott. And there was a report I heard that talked about some of the incentives to bring these illegal immigrants to the country. And some might think that this is an isolated issue of immigration, but I really think it's part of a bigger Marxist plan to usher in a different way of doing things where the government is in charge, right? You start giving stuff away to non-citizens, and citizens say, hey, you don't give me anything, and then they come in, hey, we'll give you something too. Sure, we'll make you equally as poor. We'll have egalitarian paupers everywhere. Anyway, I want you to listen to this report.
We wanted to show you just how much asylum seekers are getting in some of our biggest blue cities, starting right here in New York. If you're a migrant, you're guaranteed housing, some of them being placed in hotel rooms that average $300 a night. Then a number of those migrants qualify to be part of the $53 million debit card pilot program. That means they are handed $1,000 on a debit card each and every month. Add SNAP benefits on top of that, and we're talking an additional $1,400. In Los Angeles, migrants are given full coverage health insurance and soon could also get $1,000 a month through the city's new guaranteed income pilot program, which is immigration status blind. That means you could get it even if you're not here legally. And in Chicago, they so far have spent $300 million since 2023 on migrants. That's on things like food and even laundry. As part of that spending, it's going towards rental assistance. If you're a migrant there, you could get up to $15,000 annually.
So you've got housing assistance and you've got guaranteed income, or what some have called universal basic income. This sounds like a utopian wet dream, dare I say fantasy, to make it, it is late night radio, but still, I want to be on the safe side here. This is insanity to me, but this is where we're at, folks. So I want to talk about not only this, but everything that goes along with ushering in the next generation of Marxism with the author of the book, Next Gen Marxism, co-authored with Mike Gonzalez, our guest, Kate Gorka. She's a former director for civil society at the Heritage Foundation, and prior to that, she worked as a presidential appointee in the Office of Policy at the Department of Homeland Security, where she focused on strategies for the prevention of terrorism and targeted violence. Kate Gorka, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's so good to be here.
Thank you. So we have a massive immigration problem, or I should say a situation that we've created through policies from the White House and others. And in my opinion, it's all one more spoke in the wheel of ushering in Marxism left, right, and center. What say you?
You know, it's an interesting question, and that we did not specifically address the immigration question, but when we were doing the research, because honestly, when we were writing the book, it was sort of just as the immigration crisis was starting to build back up again. But, you know, when we were doing the research for the book, of course, I came across something called the Cloward-Piven plan, which was a plan of Marxists from the late 60s, where they said, if we can flood the United States with immigrants and basically break the welfare system, put so many people onto the welfare system that it causes it to collapse, and that will hasten the downfall of the United States.
And folks, this is something that I've read about in the past, and I thought it was shocking that there even was such a approach, the Cloward-Piven plan. But it's Dr. Richard Cloward and his wife, Frances Fox Pivens. These are both avowed communists and both academics. And it's they used to be on the fringe. I think now they're more in the mainstream, at least with folks on the left. Kate Gorka, you bring up a really good point, and in addition to what you've just brought up, there's a lot more research that I'm sure you've done when you're talking about the next generation of Marxism, and your book's title, Next Gen Marxism. How does that look in the United States? Because I think for many, including some of my Cuban friends that know communism firsthand and they could sniff it a mile away, they oftentimes feel like America can never be like Cuba, and the reality is we probably won't. Right? Our model of Marxism would probably look a lot more like China, because they have a somewhat robust economy, depending on what day of the week you're looking at the economy. But I feel like there's a unique aspect to this next gen Marxism. Tell us more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, you know, of course, the first big wave of Marxism, kind of the original Marxism, was all about, the focus was on the worker. The belief that the worker would revolt, which of course, never happens, right? Because workers actually, surprise, surprise, they like having a job. They like their families. They like their country. They don't want to overthrow it. So, what happened was, particularly after the failure of the communist revolutions in Italy and Germany in around 1920, various intellectuals who were involved with those revolutions did a really deep reflection to ask themselves, well, why did it fail? And of course, out of that, we get the famous or the infamous Antonio Gramsci, the Italian, who argued that the reason those revolutions failed is because the workers had not been sufficiently indoctrinated into a new way of thinking. And so the way forward was not to work for an active, violent revolution, but actually to try to infiltrate the cultural institutions and change the way people think about the culture and think about the country. And that really is what we are seeing today. Now, it's gone through other changes as it came here to the United States. So there was another very big turning point, I would say, in the late 1950s. And let's just remember, since you're mentioning your Cuban friends, and by the way, my co-author, Mike Gonzalez, he was born in Cuba and fled as a child with his family. So it's kind of near and dear to our hearts what happened there. But remember, this is so surprising. Harvard University actually welcomed Fidel Castro to come and speak to the students just months after the revolution of Cuba. And so you wonder why our universities are as insane as they are, right? But that was a really important turning point, because at that point, late 50s, early 60s, it was the birth of what was called the New Left. And at that point, the belief was the revolution, it's not happening with the workers. We think it can happen with the youth, with the students. And that's what you saw throughout the 60s, right? The great radical 60s movements. And so then I would say then there was like yet a third kind of key turning point to bring us to where we are today. And that was where, So basically the failed student revolutions, the students went off in different directions, but one group went into the law schools. They said, we're not able to bring about the revolution by violence on the streets. Let's try to do it by tackling the law. So they went into the law schools. They created critical legal studies. But what happens there? This is so interesting, I think, because these were basically all white men, and their students started to be more diverse. And lo and behold, come 1989, these various law students who were now sort of getting to be a little bit older, who were women, who were different ethnicities, and men as well. And they said, white men, it's time for you to step out of the conversation. And they created critical legal theory. And that's what's kind of gotten us to critical race theory. And that's what's gotten to where we are today, where, unlike Cuba, or even, I would say even China or other more traditionally Marxist countries where it's the economic revolution that's really the focus. Here in the United States, the focus of revolution has become over things like race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation.
Yeah, and of course the climate, right? Can't
climate,
leave that out.
Yes, can't forget climate.
Folks, we're on with Kate Gorka. She's a former director at the Heritage Foundation and was appointed by the president to serve in the Office of Policy at the Department of Homeland Security, where she focused on strategies for prevention of terrorism and targeted violence. And she's got a brand new book that she's co-authored with Mike Gonzalez. It's called Next Gen Marxism. I encourage you to get not one copy, but get two, one for yourself, one to give away, so that people can understand how so many of our societal ills are rooted in Marxism. And we're going to continue our discussion with her straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our discussion on Marxism and what it looks like in the United States. And it's not always easy to decipher because most people write it off as this or that or some left-wing policy. But the reality is it's staring us right in the face and it's being ushered in right beneath our noses, seeing it every single day, even though the word Marxism isn't even being used. Kate Gorka is our guest. She is the author of the book Next Gen Marxism. Kate Gorka, when we see so many examples of Marxism, and you're explaining so many of these societal ills that are rooted in Marxism in your book, I think it's important for us to note that this is not the Marxism that we saw in the Soviet Union. It's not even, like you mentioned earlier, with the International Gramsci Society. It's not what we saw prior to that, right? It's what they kind of came up with and said it's cultural Marxism. What can people expect to glean from your book when they pick up a couple of copies?
Well, so I think the history, you can't fight it if you don't understand it. And you were absolutely right to say that part of the problem is most people don't actually use the term Marxism, right? So people don't know that that's what it is. I mean, you have the very famous video of Patrisse Cullors, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, saying to an audience, "We are trained Marxists." So there are those who will openly use the term, but for the most part, people don't. And I think there are plenty of people that have been sort of swept up into this who have no idea that it's actually fundamentally Marxist. And if you don't understand that, first of all, two problems. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand that it really is out to destroy us and that it is absolutely irreconcilable with the American system. But the other is, if you don't understand it, you can't fight it. So I would say 2/3 of the book is kind of explaining the history from Marx. And, we move through it quickly, and I think it's entertaining. But, through the 60s into the 80s, critical race theory, then the various sort of permutations of what happened after that. But a big chunk of the book is about what people can do to fight back. And there's sort of two parts to that. One is what can individuals do, but there's also a lot on what legislators can do, because some of this is being tackled, particularly at the state level. There are ways to fight back, and it is being fought.
Folks, we're on with Kate Gorka, and she's the author of the book Next Gen Marxism, co-authored with Mike Gonzalez. And Kate Gorka, I agree with you 100% that this is here, and if we don't know what we're looking at, it's difficult for us to diagnose it or even label it or describe it. And I think that this approach is incredibly effective, right? I mean, to give kudos to Marx, which is the last thing I want to do, this is probably one of the biggest, most effective movements culturally and even ideologically, even perhaps academically, that I've seen in my lifetime that has gotten to so many areas, and it permeates so many college campuses, and we see it, rearing its ugly head in policy, and it's just it's a shocking and somewhat scary thing to me to see it. But then I see books like yours that I say, well, there's a silver lining in the clouds, right? Hopefully more and more people will be empowered and enthused to kind of take this on and tackle this problem. What is your, final words of advice or admonition to the audience that's listening on what we must do as Americans to tackle Marxism?
Well, I think we have to stop being cowed by the left. I think too many people are afraid to speak out because they're going to get canceled, or, if they're young parents and they're afraid that a target will be put on their kids' backs. We have to speak out against this. What they are doing to our country is just outrageous. We are not systemically racist. You can't actually change gender. So I think speaking out against these things, and I also think it's super important for people to find like-minded individuals, come together, fight this with others. I mean, it's a very hard thing to tackle alone. But if you find others who feel the same way, then you can start to create a movement. You can start to really push back.
Now, Kate Gorka, for everybody that's listening, let them know how they get a copy of the book and how do they follow you and learn more about the work you're doing.
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon and everywhere else, and they can follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook at Catherine Gorka, or I'm on Twitter at Gorka Katie.
Outstanding. Well, Kate Gorka, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you for being with us and staying up late to kind of school us on Next Gen Marxism. Godspeed to you and the book.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And folks, we're coming right back with you all. We're going to have some discussion on corruption and how corruption stretches into the upper echelons of power. It's a book called Squeeze Play, and I'm really interested in learning about it because oftentimes I think we know about the inner workings, the machinations that go on inside of our government or the political systems that we see around us, but we don't always understand the nuts and bolts of it, or we become used to the corruption and we just write things off. I want to make sure we highlight those things so that we see them and we identify them and we stop them. So we're going to discuss that straight ahead. Scheduled to be with us is the author Jeffrey Marshall of the book Squeeze Plays. And of course, after that, it's Open Phone America. The phone number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Keep it locked right here. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you worked so hard in the industry and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. And I just lowered my radio over here, listening to some reggaeton to keep me going on a Friday night, and looking forward to Open Phone America with all of you. That's coming up at the top of the hour. 833-482-5337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And just a quick reminder for everybody that I've been getting a lot of messages when we get preempted due to sports or programming changes at certain stations. You know, we're on several hundred stations, and sometimes one station or, you know, several that carries different sports programs might knock us off to put somebody else on. And I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. You can always listen to the show live. Have your backup ready. Go to richvaldez.com. That's Valdez with an S, richvaldez.com, and you can listen to the live show, yesterday's show, last month's show. You can listen to pretty much anything you want on the website. It's a pretty good website. Just click the Listen Live button to listen live at richvaldez.com. Now, I want to bring in our guest because I mentioned this right before the break that we were going to talk a little bit about this this book, Squeeze Place, and how it's international financial thriller, and it really focuses on lifestyle and the rich and the powerful, and ultimately a web of corruption that stretches into the upper echelons of power. And I think that's just so reminiscent of what we see in real life every day, right? It really is something to look at. And I thought it would be fun to have a discussion on this. So let's see. Let's bring in our guest, Jeffrey Marshall. He's a novelist and retired journalist. Jeffrey Marshall, welcome to the program, sir.
I'm delighted to be with you, Rich. Honored.
Thank you. Likewise. So after, pounding the pavement with the shoe leather and being a journalist, you decided I'm going to write a book, and you've got this amazing story. Tell us about it.
Well, actually, this is my third novel, Rich. The first one was a historical novel. The second was a psychological thriller. And this one, I really kind of reached back to my roots as a financial journalist, or I started actually in the newspaper business like many people do, as a general assignment reporter and writer, and morphed into financial journalism. Most of that was in New York. So I had kind of a firsthand view of a lot of things that were going on in banking and finance. But the story as I created it really wasn't anything directly coming out of my own background. It was just sort of, things that I had picked up through osmosis and thought would make, the makings of a great story.
Yeah, well, that's oftentimes how it works out. Now, let's talk about this current book, Squeeze Place. What was the impetus or the inspiration to write this particular thriller?
Well, it actually started with my wife saying to me, "Why don't you write about Bob?" And Bob was an editor that I'd had in New York. He was my boss. I worked for him. He was an incredible character. He had quite a following in the industry, but he had kind of the shortest fuse I'd ever encountered. He had a tremendous temper, and some of that it takes place in the novel. But I made him more or less the focal point or the hero of the story, and he's the one who kind of comes in, gets a tip, and starts digging around and sort of discovers what's going on in this skullduggery that's being launched by this Russian oligarch. And that was, putting a Russian in kind of into this story just seemed so topical and so timely to me.
Yeah, right. It's never a good thriller without a good Russian antagonist. Right. So walk us through this a little bit. What's the setting like, and how does it begin to evolve?
Okay, well, I've got two principal characters starting out. I've got a banker, a CEO of an international bank, and a tabloid publisher, kind of similar to somebody who would be, for instance, for the New York Post or something like that. And he's kind of a scion of a rich family. He's done his thing. He's not really looked on too kindly by his board, but he's kind of in charge. He's the chairman. But he's really kind of gotten on without any great expertise on his part. So, but like so much of print journalism, this paper is in deep trouble, and he needs a financial lifeline. And the banker his bank has provided a great deal of that financing, and there's a loan a working capital loan that's out to this publisher that's just not, apparently, they realize that you're not going to get their money back, so they cancel the loan, and that puts a great deal of pressure on our publisher, and what do you know? The Russian oligarch gets wind of this, and he steps in and says, "Oh, I'll make you an offer." And so he comes in and basically puts up the amount of the loan that's been canceled. He has a few conditions; they're not too onerous. And meanwhile, there's some other things going on in the background. There's some sexual blackmail that's being undertaken by the Russian oligarch against the bank.
Is Puff Daddy involved in that?
Pardon me?
Is Puff Daddy involved in that? Did he?
No. I thought about that, but it didn't include him. No, this was written sometime before all that came to light. And so this takes place in both New York and London. There's quite a bit that's going on in London where the bank is kind of co-headquartered, and there's been a change in management there. And so there's a lot of sort of back and forth, and then the sexual blackmail against the banker kind of becomes a way for him to look. Somebody else comes in, steps in, and says, "Well, I can kind of turn it around on the oligarch for you," and that's what he does. And so everybody's a little bit compromised. There's a lot of satire. There's certainly a lot of discussion about the foibles and the shortcomings of the rich and well-to-do.
Folks, we're discussing the book Squeeze Plays. It's a financial thriller that is based in New York, and I find it just fascinating because, over the last year or two or three, we've seen, billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein arrested on sexual blackmail, sex trafficking, all sorts of craziness, and then this questionable death of his, and so many things that you can draw from the major headlines and really come up with a story that's probably just as real as everything that's going on in real life. Exactly. So I want to continue that discussion with our guests straight ahead. Jeffrey Marshall is the author. He's a novelist and a retired journalist, and we're coming right back with him. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our discussion with novelist and retired journalist Jeffrey Marshall. He's written the book that we're discussing, Squeeze Plays. And Steve in Atlanta, Georgia, on WGKA has a question about potentially having a different bad guy in the next thriller. Steve, go right ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it. So would you be daring enough to be able to bring what's going through people's minds now in America, popular, probably the world, and bring China into it? China.
Thank you, Steve. Jeffrey Marshall?
I'd have a difficult time doing that in a way because I really don't know enough about what's going on in China. So much of that is opaque. We do hear a lot about, ByteDance, TikTok, and some of the things that they seem to be trying to do, spy satellites and everything. But I think I'd need to do a good deal of research before I could do that. I really didn't have to do that with creating a Russian oligarch. I'd read enough about them. They're shadowy figures, but they're fascinating and mysterious, and that was really my impetus there. But I think China would be more difficult. I personally would have more trouble coming up with it.
And I noticed that you used New York and London as well as a lot of satire to really put this stuff together, and it seems like you're drawing inspiration from a lot of what you've actually experienced in your career.
I am, particularly in New York, because, I worked there in Manhattan for 17 years, and you can't work there and not sort of pick up a lot of those vibrations and those signals. London was a little bit different story. That really kind of required a little bit of research. And the cultures in New York and London, I can't say that really firsthand because I haven't been in London, but I think it's certainly a little bit different culture. It's more in terms of finance. It's a little more relaxed, a little more old boy, and New York is a little bit more cutthroat.
Now, tell us a little bit about why you used satire to reveal some of the corruption and the influences of wealth and power that you kind of lay out in the book.
I was really kind of inspired. Many of your listeners will probably be familiar with the book Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. Came out in the 80s, and it was really very topical at the time, and used satire extremely effectively. I was really, and I certainly, it was, so in some ways this is kind of a homage to what he did there. But I think it sort of lends itself to that. I mean, these people present themselves as sort of being above it all and pure in their chase for wealth. But there are a lot of things that I think are good grist for novelists are kind of going on behind the scenes, and some of their shortcomings are manifest.
And folks, I just want to remind you that we're on with Jeffrey Marshall. He is the author of the book Squeeze Plays. And let's talk a little bit about blackmail. I know blackmail plays a key role in the story. Why did you put so much emphasis on blackmail?
Well, I think it's an important way for people to exert leverage on others. And in this case, the Russian basically plants a female operative and creates kind of a sexual blackmail situation that he can exert on the banker. I think it's just it's something that it's something that novelists have used a lot. I think is a very effective way to kind of present a way for people to find a way to put that pressure, put that leverage on, and seemingly get away with it in many times because the blackmailee is very often reluctant to come forward.
Now, as a financial journalist and a journalist overall in your career, when you were covering the different stories and learning about things, was this something that kind of came your way, maybe on background, where people weren't willing to be on the record, but they were saying, no, this guy's blackmailing that guy, and that's why this deal is happening?
Actually not. I think the people I dealt with were either too clever or too pure for that. I never really got wind of that. So I think this really kind of came out of my reading of a lot of thrillers.
Okay, sounds good. Folks, Jeffrey Marshall's the author of this novel, Squeeze Plays. And Jeffrey, let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book.
Well, you can find it on Amazon, and it's also available on some other online platforms, Kobo, Apple, Barnes & Noble. And I do have a website, which I could mention at some point if
sure,
you
go
want
right ahead.
to, Rich. It's jmarshbks.com, jmarshbks.com. So that will take you to not only to Squeeze Plays, but to some of my other work, and you can read about me and my career.
Outstanding. Jeffrey Marshall, check him out at jmarshbks.com and get a copy of the book, get one to give away as well. It sounds like a really good thriller. Mr. Marshall, I want to thank you for staying up late with us. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, we're going to continue our conversation with you all. Open Phone America is coming up at the top of the hour, and we'll be doing a couple of calls between now and then, as well as a couple of other things that I wanted to hit before we get into the top of the hour. So don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And we have Open Phone America coming up at the top of the hour. Get your calls in now, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. You know, in an homage to the great one, Mark Levin, who I learned so much in talk radio from, he would always, his liner for the calls would be 833, just as an example, right? 833-482-5337. Or if you're a liberal, call the liberal line, 833-482-5337. And it always made me laugh. It was the same number, and the libs thought they were calling another number. And some of them really did, which was funny, because they'd say, this is a liberal line, right? And I would just always laugh. Anyway, that's the number. You're welcome to call. I want to play something that I heard yesterday, and I thought, man, this is pretty good. We should play it on the radio so that you could get an idea of what's going on. And it was it's a video that was put out by the Trump campaign, and I think it makes a good case. And there's a couple of them, right? But the one that I want to play for you runs about a minute. Listen to this.
We have to have peace. We have to have law and order.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
I unequivocally condemn the violence.
I said, no. I said, if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Too many see the protests as the problem. Please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Go to the Hill today. Get up in the face of some Congress people.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Running away from Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
They go low. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Wow. Let me tell you, that is some violent rhetoric that you never heard coming out of Trump's mouth, my mouth, anybody else, right? I've never said you're going to have to track down anybody and put a bullet in them. This is what we're dealing with, right? With the radical extreme left, the people that think that I disagree with Donald Trump politically, so therefore, you know, he needs to be stopped. The White House needs to be blown up. I mean, it's just crazy, the rhetoric that we're hearing. Right? I don't support and it's not that I'm some sort of white flag waving, tree hugging pacifist. Trust me, I'm not. I don't think there is any virtue or benefit in this type of divisive rhetoric. I just don't think so, right? I think Trump is right on. Be peaceful and patriotic about it. You know, make your voice be heard, but do it in a peaceful and patriotic way. Because I think the old saying, right, and maybe it's, you know, just what you learn as a kid, and it's stuck with me, but you get a lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, right? And I think that's just so true. You kill people with kindness, and you got to stand up to them. You stand up to them. Sometimes you have to do that, but ultimately, I think you've got to just do the right thing. And the right thing is not saying, you know, we've got to put a bullet in Donald Trump, or when you see people, you got to shout them down, or all of this stuff that we hear from the cast of characters from Joe El Baboso Biden, Nancy La Bruja Pelosi. I don't have a name for Maxine Waters, but the things that she says on there, and there's so many. Que mala eres, of one of my faves, right? She has not been as vocal on the violence, but there's a couple of clips of her out there too. And bottom line here is they want to say that Trump is a dictator and the right is extreme and this and that, but ultimately, listen to them, right? I mean, that's the ultimate juxtaposition and exercise in hypocrisy if I've ever seen one. Anyway, the music means that we're taking a pause and we're coming back. You get to use the bathroom, but you got to come back. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Open Phone America is kicking off right now. I'm looking forward to chatting with each and every one of you. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. If you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to recap a little bit of what we talked about tonight, because we've had a lot of interesting things, right? I'm here in the epicenter of this earthquake. I'm here, and I slept through the first one at 10:23 a.m. I wake up at 10:30, and I didn't feel a thing. And then I was at the gym at 6 p.m. when we got the 4.0 one, the aftershock. So we had a 4.8, on the Richter scale, followed by a 4.0 on the Richter scale aftershock. And I didn't feel either one of them. But here is a statement from the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul.
This is one of the largest earthquakes on the East Coast occur in the last century. So I immediately directed my emergency management team the second we received word of this to start doing damage assessments, any life in danger, and finding out whether there's any bridges or tunnels that are compromised. And so that was the first reaction you'll be hearing from the team that has been working on that. I also immediately spoke to Governor Phil Murphy to offer any assistance and to find out what is happening in his state, which again was the epicenter. Our teams have been in constant communication with the mayor of New York. We also spoke to the MTA to ensure the integrity, the structural integrity of the subway system, the Port Authority.
So that's, again, Governor Hochul, going down the laundry list of things. And that's what happened. Earthquake was here. Again, I wish I was awake. I wish I could give you such a great report. Like some of the people I spoke with, they were like, oh, my God, the whole building was shaking. You didn't feel it? One of my buddies, he texted me. He was like, hey, you good? I was like, yeah, I'm great. And he was like, yeah, me too. I'm at work. Everybody's telling me, did you feel that? I didn't feel anything. So, I mean, there were people in the same place that didn't, some felt it and some didn't. But that is what occurred. And either way, a 4.8 is a pretty big earthquake for this part of town. And I can't remember the last time we had one, or maybe we did. Maybe we had one, maybe not that high. I don't remember. I think we had an earthquake about 10 or 12 years ago. I don't remember the magnitude of it, but it's not a popular occurrence in New York, New Jersey, that's for sure. So I think that's why I was making such big headlines here today. And something else that I want to go into, there's a bunch of interesting stories here. I'm not going to do these in this segment, but I'm going to get to them. I promise you. Well, I don't want to promise because I might run out of time. You know how radio goes. But listen to this story. There's 2 stories that I want to share with you that I really think are interesting. A man, he's now going viral on social media because he was in the middle of receiving a vasectomy when the earthquake struck. I think that's kind of nuts, right? Imagine you're in the middle of this delicate procedure and all of a sudden everything starts shaking. So we'll get into that story in a little bit. I thought it was just funny, and I wanted to talk about that. And another story that's interesting, again, a useless one, but still fun. A study is showing that the actual coin flip probability is not 50-50. Now, I think of this and I think, really? How could it be anything other than, right? You've got 2 sides of a coin. It's got to be a 50-50. Well, we will debunk that or support it or agree with it or whatever in a little bit. But I want to jump into this story because I think this is a very interesting story coming out of the United States, but regarding China. And it's Microsoft. Microsoft is saying that China is behind fake accounts that are polling U.S. voters on domestic political issues. Now, there's always been this type of foreign influence in our elections. And China is excellent at it. So is Russia, and Iran even gets involved. And we saw it happening in the 2020 election. I remember the State Department and the Director of National Intelligence putting out a whole warning on some of this stuff because there were lots of pieces of disinformation and misinformation with what they believed were links back to Iran. But the Chinese government appears to be operating fake social media accounts. And isn't that something? Who would have thought it, right? Who would have thunk it? And they're polling followers on their views on domestic political issues, according to this new report from Microsoft. I don't know how much you trust Microsoft, but that is the story. I hear something. Do you hear something? Do you hear it too? Okay. I don't know where that's coming from. Anyway, we're getting some interference here. Anyway, that really threw me for a loop. Anyway, I want to keep going with my story here. And the bottom line here is that Microsoft is saying that this information is coming from hackers from China. And they're called the Microsoft Threat Analysis Center. They observed a small yet steady increase in what they call sock puppet accounts, which, do what they do. And these accounts are nearly exclusively posting about United States domestic issues such as drug use, immigration policy, racial tensions. And we'd seen this in the past where Russia had done similar. And what they were doing was kind of using Facebook to target certain groups that they likely had, gotten people to join, and created two opposing protests, I believe, of Black Lives Matter supporters on one side of the street, and I don't remember who the other group might have been, but another domestic political issue, and coalesced both of these people to be pretty much in the same place at the same time, hoping that they would clash. And, it's kind of like, playing chess with the people in another country. And this is why I'm always so skeptical to get involved in some of the stuff that my tinfoil hat tells me to get involved in, because I realize that so much of this may not be the good guys or the bad guys or the white hats or the black hats, right, that are secretly leaking information or leaving breadcrumbs or this or that. But it's really probably just the bad guys taking advantage of people who really mean well, taking advantage of our goodwill and our desire to see America be a better place, and trying to stoke the fears and the flames of so much of our emotion to get us to react a certain way. And I don't put it past China or anybody else. Now, one of the quotes in this article that I'm looking at in the Hill says that this tactic may be for the purpose of seeking further engagement or possibly to gain insight into how Americans' views on U.S. politics actually are. And that's according to the Microsoft statement. So many of these accounts could be operating to increase intelligence gathering around key voting demographics in the U.S. In one instance, an account posted about a Senate proposal that sought to pair border funding with aid to Ukraine and Israel and asked followers, "What's your reaction?" Another post criticized the Biden administration over a missing F-35 jet and asked, "What do you think about this?" Actors that are linked to China and their influence operations are also increasingly using AI, right, artificial intelligence, to produce very sleek, engaging visual content to target the U.S. population. Again, that's according to Microsoft. Now, does that mean I believe the Microsoft thing? No, I don't necessarily believe what they're saying. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. They're the ones that left the back door open for the SolarWinds attack, right? Remember that? About a year ago or 2 years, whatever it was. So I'm not necessarily married to this report either, but at some point, I think it's safe to say the bad guys are definitely trying to influence us one way or the other, and it's always important for us to be cognizant of that. Anyway, I want to get to some of your calls before we take our break, and I want to start off with our brother Gil in Manila, Philippines. Gil, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, Rich.
Hey, Gil, just yell if you have to, because you sound like you're in another country.
I was going to call you on April 1st, on April Fool's Day, but unfortunately I was at a doctor's appointment when you were supposed to phone America. So, anyhow, first of all, of course...
Gil, I just want to double check. Are you on speakerphone?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to work this with my new hearing aid, so let's see if we can make it work.
I just want to make sure everybody hears you, and you sound really far away.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Not okay. We hear you very poorly. But go ahead. Just yell.
According to the phone, I've got a pretty good signal. But
perfect.
What I wanted to call about was a couple of things. First of all, it was Transgender Recognition Day. It had been moved from Easter Sunday to April 1st. And I wanted to tell people that they should always look at the bright side, that now that so many LGBTQs are out of the closet, there's a lot more room to hang your clothes. So,
that's funny.
Okay. Well, anyhow, I had a little about a 30-minute song for Transgender Pride, and it goes something like this: "We will rally round our flag. We will rally round our flag. With the rainbow flag of freedom. Let's hear it for gay pride. It's great. It's great. Up with the gay guys, down with the straights. We will rally around our flag when we all show up in drag. Up with the rainbow flag of freedom."
Gil, you never cease to amaze me. You're now, I have to add composer in addition to your comedian credits. Funny song and quite interesting at the same time. Gil, I love you, man. Thank you for the call. I hope you had a great April Fool's Day as well. Thank you for always being a faithful listener and caller of the program. Godspeed to you, brother. I got to hit this break right now at 20, but I appreciate it. Folks, we're coming right back with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So you hear General Jack Keane. He says we strengthened Hamas's hand by saying to Israel, either you find ways to carry this out we're losing far fewer civilians, or we're going to change our policy in terms of support for you. He says it's quite appalling, and we should stay out of it.
Well, with all due respect to the general, who I know and like and for a long, long time, I would just have to disagree. Number one, you can't look at all the things that we've been doing for Israel since the 7th of October and suggest that we are somehow walking away from their ability to defend themselves. And frankly, in the call yesterday, the president made it very clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu that we know they have a right and responsibility to go after that threat, and we're going to continue to help them do that. It's how they do it that matters. Because one thing that does strengthen Hamas's hand, Martha, is for them to capitalize on the imagery of civilian infrastructure and capitalize on the imagery that's out there of innocent Palestinians being killed and wounded as a result of this conflict. So we want to get that ceasefire in place, temporary, 6 weeks or so, to get those hostages out, get more humanitarian assistance in.
That is National Security Council spokesman John Kirby saying, look, no, more money, more aid, more support. We are not hurting Israel in any way with these threats. All I could say is, John Kirby, I think, is for those who had any credibility, who saw him as a credible source, I think he's losing a lot of that credibility. Things are just falling by the wayside for this administration, in my opinion. I am a critic. But I want to get your thoughts on this and so much more. Let's go to Boise, Idaho, listening online. Big shout out to KBOI. Paul, go right ahead.
Rich, thanks for taking my call. I feel a little heartbroken, and I feel as though we planted a knife in the back of the Israelis. I know we're not going to run away from them completely, but I think that phone call was one that was very, very eerily familiar, and that was the one that Trump made to Ukraine and said, I'd like to pay their done, and they called it quid pro quo. And I think that's what we just witnessed Joe doing the same thing, quid pro quo.
Yeah, putting conditions on aid and whatnot.
It's as plain as the nose on my face.
Right. Quid pro Joe, right? They were calling him back then.
Yeah. And it bothers me because, are we going to be a fair weather ally around the world to whoever else? Are we going to back out of NATO when it comes time to it to be helpful over there? You know what I'm saying? It opens up a Pandora's box.
Right.
That I think is dangerous for the world.
I certainly hope not, and I agree. It is dangerous for the world. This is an issue that, again, I take exception to how the administration is handling pretty much every international situation that has been born of their, I'm going to say, recklessness. Right? These are not things that happened on their own. I really don't care. This is not something I can argue. I can barely articulate it, to be very frank with you. There's not a person on the planet that's going to change my mind. Joe Biden's fecklessness, his weakness, the seeming ineptitude or the perceived ineptitude of Joe Biden and this administration, in particular on foreign policy, his unwillingness to get involved, his flagrant pacifism, all of this stuff has contributed to emboldened enemies. And I realize I got a bunch of members of my family that they are so against my thoughts on this. I believe that the United States and anybody who is powerful has a responsibility to act, irrespective of having allies. Having allies makes it even worse, right? Or existing partnerships or whatnot. But I think if you are 6'5", 230 pounds, you're built like a wrestler, and you're walking down the street and you see an old lady getting accosted or getting her pocketbook robbed by some schmuck, is it not literally your responsibility to get in that and be like, hey, bro, cut it out, or grab this guy and hold him down till you can, effect a citizen's arrest, or do what you got to do? She can't do it. He's clearly trying to overpower her. You're the big guy on the block, right? So for everybody out there, and again, I'll probably lose some listeners today, but yes, if you're the big guy on the block, you have to be the cop. You have to get involved. You can't just turn a blind eye and say, I'm going to mind my business. I'm not involved in this anymore. It's a farcical idea. It really is. There is not a part of the world history that I've ever seen where we're not where we're not involved in some sort of international conflict. It's part and parcel of who we are. And to see the Biden administration just really abdicate that for everybody that's saying, we've got to strictly be isolationists. No, we cannot. Look at the result. Biden's doing it. Anyway, and he stirs the pot on top of that. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more. Paul, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Well, Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And the voice that you just heard paying me an incredible compliment, saying that I have some of the best radio programs radio's ever heard. I mean, really, really serious compliment, is the voice of superstar entertainer Tony Orlando when we had him on the show. And I would be remiss if I didn't wish him a happy 80th birthday to my buddy Tony Orlando. Now, not everybody gets a chance to say that Tony Orlando was a colleague of theirs, but he was a colleague of mine, and we worked in the same studio, and he still does a radio show on Saturday nights. And Tony Orlando's a heck of a guy. And I first met him interviewing him for I forget what the topic was, on a morning show. I was doing a morning show, and he was so courteous and kind to me, so respectful. He kept calling me Mr. Valdez, and I was just blown away by this. And I said, Tony Orlando, you're Tony Orlando. You can call me Rich. And he said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll call you Rich if you call me Tony. And I was like, oh, my gosh. And then we became colleagues. And he's just a phenomenal guy. I'm always grateful to have him on the program. Tony Orlando, happy birthday to you. Godspeed. I don't know if you're keeping it a secret, but Tony Orlando's 80 years old and still rocking shows. I just saw him do a show. I think it was at Foxwoods or somewhere here on the East Coast. So big shout out to Tony Orlando. And funny thing that we share, he's also Puerto Rican, right? Half Greek, half Puerto Rican. He calls himself a Greek-a-Rican. So happy birthday to Tony Orlando. Make sure you hit him on social media and tell him you heard it was his birthday and wish him a happy birthday. Now, I want to get to the rest of your calls and more. We have a lot of calls, and we're going to get to all of them, I promise, even if I have to rush through them a little bit to make sure we squeeze everybody in. It is Friday, and there is no tomorrow, so we're going to get everything that we can get in today. Let's go to Danbury, Connecticut, WLAD, and check in with Jim. Jim, what's up? You're on with Rich Valdez.
How you doing, Rich? Listen, my brother said he felt the quake. He's down in West Deptford, about 20 minutes from the Philadelphia line. And I guess the place of origin was Lebanon, New Jersey. But I also heard yesterday that a lightning bolt hit the Statue of Liberty.
Yep. So let me tell you a little bit about this. I got a friend or two sent me a text message with a photo of that. Then my daughter sent it to me today. And it's amazing how many photos of this were captured. And the only reason that I was getting them from my friends was earlier this year in January, I got a tattoo of the Statue of Liberty and a microphone and some headphones on my forearm. And it took hours and hours to complete this, but the flame on the torch of the Statue of Liberty that's on my arm, I got it in Colombia, right, when I was on a trip, and they were closing the place down where I was getting the tattoo. And he said, look, I'm sorry, man, I'm not going to be able to put all the detail into the flame. I'm just going to outline it, and when you come back for your next visit, we'll finish it up. So I haven't had a big flame that's very noticeable or filled in or anything on my Statue of Liberty. So my friend, another friend of mine who's a tattoo artist, he added the flame for me, but I don't know, my skin caught a reaction to the ink, and it was colored ink, and whatever the problem was, it just didn't take. And so another friend of mine was making fun of me, and he was sending me this lightning bolt, and he was saying, look, the Statue of Liberty in real life is like the one on your arm now, no flame. And he thought that was funny, and I thought it was funny too in the moment. But thankfully, no damage done to the Statue of Liberty. But I did see that picture, and it was fascinating that they were able to capture that from so many different angles, Jim.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like somebody from above telling us to cut the crap. There's so much stuff going on. 11 tornadoes in the Midwest.
Like Liberty's literally under fire. Well, Jim, thank you. You're cutting in and out, so I'm going to move on. But thank you for the call, my brother, and I appreciate you listening and calling in. Big shout out to everybody on WLAD, Danbury, Connecticut. My aunt used to live, my Titi Sonia, she used to live in New Milford, which is probably a half hour from Danbury. So I've been out there a bunch of times. Great part of town. Anyway, we continue. Something Jim just mentioned in Connecticut was some of these storms. And Tommy in Charleston, West Virginia on WCHS, he also wants to talk about storms. Tommy, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Valdez. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
To tell the global audience that right now, West Virginia is going to be dealing with flooding issues in various places, from the city of Wheeling all the way down to the city of Huntington. And this is on top of the fact that we just got hit with a tornado in south central West Virginia, including the city of Charleston, where I live. I just spent 80 hours without power. And we're so...
Sounds like Cuba.
We're so accustomed to electricity and the things that we do off of it that I went to open a can, and there's no can opener, the electric, so I used a primitive style, which I have in my drawer, and the thing falls apart on me. I had to smash it open with a hammer.
I've been there.
And we're all so spoiled, you know. But
first world problems, they call that.
Yeah, okay. But between the fact that we're recovering from a tornado, I saw right in my own neighborhood, as in a small section of the city of Charleston, dozens, approximately speaking, a little less than that, of trees broken in half. These trees have a circumference of like 24 inches.
Is this because of lightning?
No, tornado.
Or wind?
Windstorm.
Oh, tornado. Okay.
That came with it. And,
yeah, I've seen that happen myself. Just to share what you tell me, these I've seen very large trees, like trees that had like 4 feet in circumference, and I saw one get split right open during a Hurricane Sandy, to be exact. And this tree was, I don't know, 50 feet away from the house, and it was scary. For every time the wind would blow, it was split right down the middle, and it was just wobbling and wobbling. I was like, oh my gosh, that thing's coming down. I don't know if it was ever really going to come down. We had to take it down because it was a huge liability, but a huge tree, and probably 100 and some odd years old. And it's scary. And that's just one tree that I had to deal with. Imagine what you guys are dealing with. Tommy, I got to run right here, but we're coming right back with the rest of your calls. Big shout out to WCHS, Charleston, West Virginia, excuse me. And we got calls from Fort Bragg, Ohio. Let's see here, Maine, Michigan, Chicago, Florida. We got a full call board here. If you want to join the conversation, feel free. 482-5337. Again, that's 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. And I just want to remind you that this week coming up, we will be doing a segment. We're coming right back with a segment of Dear Richie, right? It's our version of Dear Abby. And if you want us to consider your story, you can go ahead and, if you have the email for that, send the email. But I think the easiest way is probably to just tag me on social media, whether it's the Facebook or the Instagram, the Truth Social, whichever one you want to use in the comment section, or make your own tweet or whatever it is. Go right ahead and do that at Rich Valdez. Make sure you put, like hashtag Dear Richie or Dear Richie in there, so I know that that's what it's about. And tell me your story. And if it's one that we can address, we will. You'll get my unexpert opinion on your relationship or other type of problem. And I'm looking forward to doing that. I think it's always funny, right? You can get relationship advice from the divorced guy. So we're looking forward to the Dear Richie segment coming up next week. But I want to continue with your calls. Let's see. Where do we go here? I want to go to Diane, Chicago, WGN, the great WGN. Go right ahead.
Oh, thank you, Rich.
Yes.
I was trying to respond to a couple of things on April 3rd, your show. I listened to the whole thing, and then at the end of the show, there was a Mr. Fortino was describing something about having to accompany a friend who had supposedly insulted somebody, and it was considered something worth getting a ticket, and he accompanied her to the magistrate, he said, and they treated him with, he was, like
right, I recall.
Or whatever.
What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, the thoughts are, coincidentally, here in the city, there was an ordinance on hate crimes, an amendment to the current municipal hate crime thing, and this alderman. And one doesn't even know these things are occurring, because I remember hearing something about this proposal on the radio, whatever. But we all, as citizens, don't have time to keep on writing letters or nagging the aldermen, because they just do things, and before you know it, it's done.
Right?
So
Yeah. It's signed into as an ordinance, and then it's there.
But this ordinance, because I looked it up and I didn't know it had passed. And the ordinance, they show it, they cross out certain parts that they're going to amend. And it has changed from hate crimes to hate incidents. And so it's to be whenever any member of the Department of Police has identified a victim of a possible hate incident committed within the city, shall, to the extent known, supply relevant information, including whatever. And then it said, thou shall also on a monthly basis prepare a statistical summary concerning all criminal acts and ordinance violations committed within the city that are believed to be hate incidents, and reported to the Chicago Police. Anything that is a hate incident, and
isn't that something? So you got hate incidents, and they're combining that with actual hate crimes. Anything that you said that is believed to be. So they're going to try and create this database, or at least a statistic, based on saying, we've had X amount of hate crimes or hate incidents from this date to this date, and clearly we have a problem, and now we need to implement this. And this is how Marx and Hegel, this is how they operated, right? They created these problems so they could engineer a reaction from the public and offer up their proposed solution, which was always rooted in Marxism. And obviously less freedom for the people and more power for the government. And it's sad, but we see it happening time and time again. So I'm with you. I'm also concerned about the state of freedom of speech in America. Part of why I got it tattooed on my arm, the Statue of Liberty, and my microphone and my headphones, because I believe that we have to speak out about the truth. We have to be able to speak our minds, whether you like my story or not, right? There's other people out there. We've invited RFK Jr. on the show, and he was a radio host that I heard on... what's it called? WLIB, right? The liberal radio station for years. And I always listened to his show, and I never agreed with any of it. But I did because I knew that I would find something I could argue with later in my show. But the point was you can listen to something and accept it. The point is that everybody's free to say what they want to say without labeling these things hate crimes or calling me a domestic extremist because I think Donald Trump would make a good president. These things are absolutely insane. Diane, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Excellent call. Big shout out to WGN in Chicago, by the way. And I want to keep going. Let's see. We've got Eduardo, Tampa, Florida. What's going on with bird flu?
Yeah, Rich. Well, yeah, that's up and coming here with bird flu. And that's going to obviously cause a spike in egg prices. I mean, we already have coca, gas going up. But interestingly about bird flu, we have I have this thing called the unsanitary criminal. You have all these diseases popping up, but they're still giving the green light on bringing these illegals, flying them in by the president's order. I mean, it's just disappointing that these things are happening, and they're happening in an election year.
Oh, I agree with you. Listen, I think, we've had this issue with bird flu in the past, so I don't know if bird flu will actually ever materialize the way they want it to, but I'm looking at a story from yesterday. Listen to this headline, Eduardo. Check this out. Bird flu infects cows, chickens, but the risk of spillover to humans is low. And then it talks about shots. So to me, this sounds like another setup for a potential COVID outbreak, right? To say, oh my gosh, the avian flu is now being reported in multiple states, and it's now infecting our cows and chickens, and the chance of it going to humans is low. Oh, we found a human with bird flu. Oh my gosh, it's another pandemic. I mean, that could happen. I hope that it doesn't. I think Americans are just way too swift for that right now. We fell for it once. I don't think we'll fall for it again for another 100 years, honestly, or maybe 50 years when people have long forgotten. But as long as you've got people that are now, like my daughter's 18 now, but in 2020, she was still a teenager that, couldn't vote and couldn't drive and did all that. But now she can. And now she can clearly look back at her life and remember how bad it was when they were kicking her out of school, how bad it was when they shut down her school and made her stay home for months on end, and how badly so many of her friends are doing because of isolation, depression, and all these other things that so many of her friends are dealing with because they didn't know what to do when they were, put into this isolation, right? Some of them were only children. Thank God my kids had each other at that time. They're only a couple of years apart, 4 years apart. But it's a huge problem, and I don't think people's memories are that short. I think people will say, FOH, right? And you figure out what that stands for, but I don't think people are buying it, honestly. I don't think so. Eduardo, thank you for the call. Big shout out to Tampa, Florida. I got some good friends, close friends that are out there in Tampa and Clearwater and in Orlando. So big shout out to everybody out there. And folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America. So again, Friday, April 5th, the United States CDC issued a health alert to inform medical folks that there is a public case of avian influenza in a person who had contact with dairy cows presumed to be infected with the virus. This guy is a farm worker from Texas and was reported infected on April Fool's Day, making it the second case of the H5N1 strain of avian flu, commonly known as bird flu, and was identified here in the U.S. So, dun, 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 dun. Anyway, let's get to your calls. I want to go to Dave, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, listening online. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Rich. Two things real quick. One is we hear every day about the innocent people in Gaza that are being affected by the Israelis and how the Israelis are the bad guys in this. We may have to change policy. Well, every story should begin with, in response to the atrocities of October 7th.
Right, to frame it, so people understand that all of this is going on as a result of what they did on October 7th. I think that's brilliant. Brilliant to make sure we preface everything with saying, as a result or in response to the atrocious attacks of October 7th, Israel's now pounding this place into, pulverizing them. And Israel has admitted, just for anybody who's, concerned or thinking that I'm endorsing any type of war crimes, Israel says that they made a mistake and that there was some AI being used or something like that, and these 3 missiles that struck the aid workers was a complete mistake. But I agree with you. Everything else that they're doing, they're there to eradicate Hamas, and it needs to be done. Ken in Lansing, I'm sorry the music kicked in. I couldn't get to your call tonight, but I appreciate it. If the Chicago mayor says he's got room for 700,000 migrants, everybody should go to Chicago. Anyway, big shout out to WILS. Folks, what a great week we've had. Stick with us. We're doing some Dear Richie next week. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.